Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're firing up a conversation about something really quite innovative in the motorcycle world, Kawasaki's development of a hydrogen-powered bike.
Yeah, it's definitely turning heads.
We've gathered some fascinating details on this project, and, well, our goal today is to really understand what makes it tick and, what hurdles it might face.
Exactly. I mean, we're seeing this big global push towards cleaner energy,
Yeah.
right? And Kawasaki is making a pretty bold statement here, exploring hydrogen specifically for motorcycles.
It's a bold move.
And the promise is exciting. Zero tailpipe emissions, but with the kind of performance riders expect.
It is compelling, no doubt. But, taking a groundbreaking idea from a concept to actually getting it into your garage, that's never easy.
Never simple, no.
So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack Kawasaki's hydrogen vision, look at its potential to maybe shake things up a bit, and also look squarely at the challenges in its path.
Okay, sounds good. Let's get right into the heart of it then. Kawasaki's put out some projected specs for this hydrogen bike, and they paint a pretty interesting picture.
They really do. So at its core, this bike uses a hydrogen fuel cell engine. Now, for those of us maybe more familiar with traditional combustion engines, what does that actually mean for, power? The estimates I saw are around 100 horsepower.
Right, 100 horsepower. That puts it squarely in competition with a lot of popular gasoline bikes out there. And the torque figures, importantly, are projected to be comparable too.
Torque.
Yeah, that immediate responsiveness that riders really enjoy, that's a key target for them here.
Okay. Now, instead of a traditional gas tank, obviously, we have a hydrogen fuel tank. When you hear that, the immediate questions that jump to my mind are, how far can you go on it and how long does it take to fill her up, so to speak?
Precisely. Those are the key practical questions.
Hmm.
Kawasaki is estimating a range of 150 to 200 miles on a single tank of hydrogen.
Okay, 150, 200 miles. That's respectable.
It is. But here's where it gets really interesting, especially when you compare it to electric.
Yeah.
The refueling time. They're projecting it to be around 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Seriously?
5 minutes.
Wow. Okay, that's potentially a game changer in terms of convenience, if that holds true. I mean, you could pull up to a refueling station, fill up, and be back on the road almost as quickly as with a gas bike.
Exactly. And that 150 to 200 mile range gives it a good level of practicality, too.
Yeah, it does.
That quick refueling, it directly addresses a key concern people have with EVs, right? The downtime for charging.
Mm-hmm. The waiting.
Yeah, combine that quick fill up with a decent range, and suddenly longer rides without huge delays seem possible. They're also aiming for a weight similar to current electric models, apparently, and a projected price point, somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000.
15 to 20,000. Okay.
So on paper, you've got a zero-emission bike, competitive power, super fast refueling, and, well, reasonable range.
It certainly sounds promising on paper. Let's dive a bit deeper into some of these key features. The zero emissions powertrain, that's obviously a huge selling point. Could you explain a bit more about how that hydrogen fuel cell actually works for someone maybe new to the tech?
Sure, certainly. The simplest way to think about it is like a chemical reaction. You have hydrogen stored in the tank, and it meets oxygen taken from the air. Inside the fuel cell, these two react.
Okay.
And that reaction produces electricity, which then powers the motor driving the bike. And the only byproduct, the only thing coming out the back, is water vapor, H2O.
Just water. Wow. So no greenhouse gases, nothing like that.
Nothing. It's a really clean picture at the point of use. It stands in contrast not just to gasoline engines, but even when you think about EVs, there's a whole life cycle of battery production and disposal to consider.
Right, the bigger picture. Now, Kawasaki is synonymous with performance, that estimated 100 horsepower, and the mention of torque being comparable to a gas engine. Why is that specific aspect so important for motorcycle riders, do you think?
Well, for so many riders, that feeling of immediate power, that strong acceleration when you twist the throttle, it's just a core part of the riding experience. It's visceral.
Yeah, it's what makes it fun.
Exactly. That instant torque we mentioned, that comes from the fuel cell powering the electric motor, it gives you that immediate responsiveness riders love. It makes the bike feel lively, engaging. So it's not just about being eco-friendly, it's about delivering a genuinely thrilling ride, too.
Gotcha. And then there's that fast refueling again. We've touched on it, but maybe elaborate a bit more. Why could that 5-minute figure, especially paired with that 150, 200 mile range, be such a big advantage over electric bikes for certain riders?
Well, think about planning a longer trip, maybe a weekend tour. With many electric motorcycles currently, you're looking at potentially significant charging stops. maybe hours added to your journey depending on the charger and the bike.
Right, you really have to plan around it.
You do. A 5-minute refueling time, though, with a 150-200-mile range. That means you could potentially cover similar distances to a gas bike, with downtime that's much more comparable.
Yeah.
It really tackles that range anxiety and the practicality issue for longer rides head-on.
It paints a picture of maybe more freedom, less planning around charging spots.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Now, Kawasaki is also highlighting a lightweight and agile design. How might using hydrogen influence the bike's design and handling compared to, say, an electric bike that needs to carry a large, heavy battery pack?
Good question.
Yeah. The key difference often comes down to weight distribution and just the overall mass. Hydrogen tanks need to be robust, for sure, because the hydrogen is stored under pressure, but they might offer more flexibility in shape and placement compared to one big, blocky battery pack. So a compact fuel tank, if they can integrate it well, can really help keep the weight centralized, lower down perhaps. And that's crucial for agile, responsive handling, the kind Kawasaki is known for, and the aerodynamic styling they mentioned. That's likely to maximize efficiency, squeeze every last mile out of that hydrogen.
Makes sense. So the performance, the range, the refueling, it all sounds pretty good. But, as we hinted at earlier, getting this tech into riders' hands won't be without challenges. What are some of the biggest hurdles Kawasaki, and really the whole hydrogen concept, face?
The big one. The elephant in the room right now is the very limited hydrogen refueling infrastructure. It's just not there yet on a wide scale.
Yeah.
Unlike gas stations on every corner or even the growing network of electric charging points, finding a hydrogen pump is, well, difficult in most places. This lack of infrastructure could seriously limit how practical the bike is for many potential buyers.
It's that classic chicken and egg problem, isn't it?
Exactly that. People might hesitate to buy the bike if they can't easily refuel it, and companies are hesitant to invest billions in building stations if there aren't enough vehicles to use them.
Right. What other challenges are we looking at?
Well, cost is another major one. The development and production costs for hydrogen fuel cell technology are still pretty substantial. These are complex systems.
Not cheap to make.
Definitely not cheap yet. Bringing those costs down to make the bike competitive in the market is a huge undertaking. That projected price of $15,000 to $20,000, that reflects some of these high initial costs.
Okay.
And then there's also public perception. We need to consider safety concerns, real or perceived, related to storing and transporting hydrogen. While it's used safely in many industries already, addressing potential consumer anxieties will be really important.
All very significant points. Okay, to get a clearer picture of where this hydrogen bike might fit in, let's look at some comparisons. We've got data lining it up against typical electric and hybrid motorcycles across a few key factors.
Yeah, this is useful. Seeing them side by side really highlights the trade-offs. So, first up, emissions.
Right.
Here, both hydrogen and full electric bikes score well. 0 tailpipe emissions. That gives them a clear environmental advantage over hybrids, which, still burn gasoline some of the time.
Okay, clear win there for hydrogen and electric. But then, refueling or recharging time, this is where it gets interesting.
It really does. That roughly 5-minute refueling time for hydrogen, as we said, it stands out dramatically compared to the hours it can take to fully charge an electric motorcycle battery.
Big difference.
Huge difference. Hybrids, of course, they offer the quick gas refueling plus the option of charging the electric part.
And what about range? How far you can actually go?
Kawasaki's 150 to 200-mile estimate for the hydrogen bike puts it in a very competitive spot. It could potentially exceed the range of some current electric models, which can vary quite a bit, from 80 miles up to maybe 150 or more for premium ones.
And hybrids.
Hybrids, with their gas tank plus battery, often sit in a similar range, maybe 100 to 180 miles, depending on the model and how you ride it.
Okay. Now, infrastructure support. Finding a place to fill up or plug in, we touched on this, but the comparison makes it stark.
Yeah, it really does. Electric charging networks are definitely growing, though there are still challenges with availability and charging speeds in some areas.
Still needs work, yeah.
Hybrids, they have the advantage of the massive existing gas station network. But hydrogen infrastructure, as we keep saying, is still very, very limited. That's its Achilles heel right now.
Major one. And finally, price.
Right. That projected $15,000 to $20,000 for the Kawasaki Hydrogen Bike puts it at the higher end compared to many electric bikes, which might range from, say, $8,000 up to $15,000 or more, and hybrids typically falling somewhere in between maybe $12,000 to $18,000.
So cost is definitely a factor, too.
Absolutely. It's a premium proposition at this stage.
So, looking at this whole comparison, it really seems like hydrogen offers some compelling plus points, especially that super fast refueling and maybe longer range potential than some current EVs.
For sure. Those are the big draws.
But that underdeveloped infrastructure and the higher projected costs are significant hurdles.
Mhm.
Big ones. They really need to be addressed for this to become, a mainstream choice.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly and talk about the design and comfort aspects. What can we glean about how this bike might look and feel?
Well, based on the info available, Kawasaki seems to be aiming for a pretty modern, futuristic, and definitely aerodynamic aesthetic. Think sleek lines, maybe minimalist elements to kind of emphasize the advanced tech inside,
Mm-hmm.
and probably using lightweight materials to keep it agile and efficient. They specifically mention an integrated, compact hydrogen tank, which suggests they've put real thought into blending that fuel storage into the bike's form smoothly.
Which must be an engineering challenge in itself, right?
Mhm.
Integrating a pressurized tank safely and without ruining the bike's lines or balance.
Oh, absolutely. Hydrogen tanks are different from gas tanks. They often have multiple layers,
Mhm.
strong materials. Placing them correctly for good weight distribution is critical for handling. It's not trivial. And, of course, expect LED lighting all around. It's pretty standard now for style and visibility.
Makes sense. What about rider comfort? The info mentions rider-friendly ergonomics, a lightweight frame, wide handlebars, plush saddle. How do these contribute, especially if you're thinking about those longer rides the range might allow?
Yeah, all those elements work together. A lightweight frame makes the bike easier to handle, less fatiguing, especially at low speeds or in twisties. Wider handlebars can give you more leverage and a feeling of control.
Okay.
And a comfortable saddle, well, that's just essential for any ride longer than down to the shops, right? It prevents discomfort, lets you focus on the ride. And they mentioned intuitive controls, which just means less fumbling, a smoother experience overall.
And that lightweight design plus the compact tank, that should feed back into the agile handling we talked about earlier. They mentioned stability too, probably from balancing the weight carefully and having a decent suspension system. What can we guess about the suspension?
Well, they mentioned a telescopic front fork, pretty standard, good for soaking up bumps and giving you a smoother ride, and an adjustable rear shock absorber.
Adjustable, okay.
Yeah, that's key. It lets riders fine-tune the suspension for their weight, their riding style, maybe even if they're carrying luggage. It helps optimize both comfort and handling performance.
It really sounds like Kawasaki is trying to tick all the boxes, not just advanced tech, but also making it a genuinely enjoyable and practical bike to actually ride.
That seems to be the goal, yes.
Yeah.
Combining innovation with usability.
Okay, let's just quickly recap then. What are the main advantages of this Kawasaki hydrogen bike that we've identified?
All right, the big ones. First, zero emissions at the tailpipe. That's huge for environmental responsibility.
Definitely.
Second, that potential for rapid refueling, like 5 minutes. A massive convenience factor compared to current EV charging times for many.
Game changer potential, yeah.
Third, the projected range, 150 to 200 miles. Offers good practicality, potentially more than some EVs.
That else.
Fourth, the performance. Aiming for power and torque comparable to gas bikes, so you don't necessarily sacrifice the thrill.
Important for Kawasaki's brand.
Very. Fifth, the lightweight and agile design they're highlighting, promising good handling. And finally, just the fact they're doing it shows alignment with future energy trends, positioning Kawasaki as forward-thinking.
It's a strong list of potential benefits.
Okay, let's tackle some common questions people might have. You know, the FAQs.
Good idea. Let's run through them.
All right, first off, the most basic one. What is the Kawasaki Hydrogen Bike in a nutshell?
Okay, simply put, it's Kawasaki's concept for a motorcycle that runs on hydrogen using a fuel cell. The big aims are zero emissions and fast refueling.
And how does that fuel cell actually work again? The simple version. Hydrogen from the tank mixes with oxygen from the air inside the fuel cell. This creates electricity to power the motor, and the only thing left over is water vapor.
Got it. Range, what's the estimate again?
Estimated 150 to 200 miles on a full tank.
And refueling time.
About 5 minutes. That's the key number they're pushing.
Okay. Biggest challenges holding it back right now.
Number one is the lack of hydrogen refueling stations for them, the infrastructure. Number two is the high cost of the technology, both development and manufacturing. And number three is dealing with safety perceptions around hydrogen.
Right. Any idea when we might actually see these bikes for sale?
No official date from Kawasaki yet. They're expected to be testing prototypes through the late 2020s. Real availability depends heavily on the tech maturing and, crucially, that infrastructure getting built out.
So maybe a while yet.
Likely, yes.
Is hydrogen just better than electric for bikes, or is it more complicated?
Well, it's definitely more complicated. It really depends on what you prioritize as a rider. Hydrogen wins on refueling speed and potentially offers better range for some use cases right now. Electric has the advantage of a much more developed, albeit still imperfect, charging infrastructure. They both have pros and cons.
No single best answer yet.
Not really, no.
And cost. What was that projected price again?
Projected around $15,000 to $20,000, so definitely a premium price point compared to many gas, electric, or even hybrid bikes currently available.
Okay. Last FAQ. Could you realistically take one of these on a long-distance tour, given everything we've said?
Potentially, yes.
Right.
But with very careful planning, the range and quick refueling are great for touring in theory.
But the but is the stations.
Exactly. You need to meticulously plan your route around the very few hydrogen stations that exist. It's possible, but not nearly as convenient as touring on a gas bike or even an EV in many areas today.
Okay, that makes sense. So bringing this all together, Kawasaki's hydrogen bike, it really represents a potentially significant step towards sustainable motorcycling, doesn't it? Offering this unique mix of performance and zero emissions.
It really does. And those key strengths we keep coming back to, the fast refueling, the potential range that could genuinely address some of the sticking points that make some riders hesitant about going fully electric right now.
Yeah, absolutely. However, we just can't ignore those pretty substantial obstacles that still need to be overcome. Building out that hydrogen infrastructure.
Right.
That's a massive undertaking. And bringing down the cost of the bikes themselves. Those are crucial for this to move beyond a niche concept.
Absolutely critical. Which leads us to a final thought, maybe for you, the listener, to ponder. Considering all this, the performance potential, the green credentials, but also the huge challenges in infrastructure and cost,
Right.
what role do you actually foresee hydrogen playing in the future of how we get around, particularly on two wheels?
Yeah, what needs to happen to unlock that potential?
Yeah, exactly. What are the key breakthroughs needed? It's definitely a fascinating space to watch in the coming years.